Host, and today my guest is Gerard O'Donnell. He's currently the Athletics Ireland coach and education manager. And our key topic for today's chat, we're all about how to unleash your speed demon, some secrets around improving your acceleration and top speed. So make sure to stick around. The athletes tuning in, parents of young athletes, and of course, high performance staff. Thank you for jumping on, Gerard. Really appreciate it, mate. Looking forward to this chat.
Yeah, no worries, Jack. Looking forward to it too.
For those that aren't aware of your work, mate, do you mind providing a background of, I guess, how you started in the industry and yeah, some different job experiences you've done over the years?
Yeah, I suppose I'm in sport all my life. I think I joined my local athletics club when I was 6 years of age, and I'm still competing in athletics to this date, competitively, and obviously coaching as well. But that's where my sport journey started, and probably like anybody did all sports through teenagers, through school, soccer, basketball, Gaelic football here in Ireland. So a bit of everything, but track and field athletics was my main one. So sprints and hurdles are where I kind of fall now, mostly. And then in terms of kind of the work side of things, I kind of when I was kind of mid 20s trying to decide what I would do in terms of I was working in the gym, I was studying. Obviously, I'd done sports management, and then I studied neuromuscular therapy. So I was working as a kind of a soft tissue therapist for a few years. Went back, did a master's in coaching science, and then got a job as a development officer with Athletics Ireland. And then I suppose probably the last maybe 6 7 years through the soft tissue therapy work, I started working in the S&C kind of role as well, because I was having guys coming to me, treating them. Their coaches were saying they've got a niggle again, back into me to treat again, and they're like giving them bits of rehab here and there. And eventually, a few of the guys were just like, "Will you just take over their S&C altogether?" And I wasn't necessarily qualified at that stage, but I suppose learned got straight in at the deep end and learned on the job. But that's where my S&C side of things kind of started. And it was with endurance athletes mainly back then, and that's not my area of expertise at all. And then I suppose a couple of teams here and there started looking for bits and pieces in terms of speed work and training in around Dublin. And I started coaching, I suppose, more formally with the group that I coach here in Dublin. Dublin Sprint, we're called. Myself and two co-coaches, Jeremy Lyons and Aidan Sinnott there, and we had two Olympians in Tokyo in the final in the mixed 4x4 relay. So I suppose that's a kind of the pinnacle we reached. But I suppose when you get that bit of success, whatever success is in sport, you have other people coming, looking, reaching out to you and looking for a bit of your work. So I was in with a couple of different teams across sports, so rugby, Gaelic football, soccer. Yeah, a lot of variation, age groups, and from grassroots right up to elite, I suppose, across all sports. But a mixed bag, bit of everything. But yeah, it's good, interesting, and challenging always.
Yeah, that's fantastic, mate. Some great experiences there. Who have been some strong influences or mentors, if you like, that have helped shape your philosophy along the way?
Yeah, I suppose Jeremy that I coach with now, he coached me for years as well. There's also a guy named Dan Moore who works here in one of the top rugby schools in the country. He's an S&C coach, would have been my S&C coach, and I picked up a lot from him in terms of my kind of ethos and philosophy towards gym work, rehab, strength and power. And then probably a lot of the other guys that you've had JB Morin on the podcast, I think, here before. The guys you see online, Twitter has been my friend a lot in terms of a coaching for a long time. The guys over in Altus, Dan Paff, especially, Jonas Dudu, who would have studied under Dan leading up to the 2012 Olympics. Those kind of guys would have probably shaped a lot of my thoughts around, or a lot of the stuff I kind of was struggling to come to conclusions over, spending a lot of time working on myself. And then I click on Twitter the next day and I see these guys have it up there in a much nicer format. And I'm like, okay, why didn't I just do this in the first place? But, going the long way around to get to conclusions that these guys have solved the problems of 20 years ago. But I suppose that's just the life of a young coach.
Absolutely. Yeah, the journey that we're all on for
Mm,
sure. Some big names there, and yeah, as you mentioned, it's important to find someone early on, I guess, in your career, and then when you don't have access to them in terms of live using things like Twitter. Have you? Is that something that was recommended to you? It's something that sort of happened organically. Have you sort of gone about not only using social media to upskill yourself, but also reaching out and fostering a relationship with your peers?
Yeah, Twitter, I kind of suppose happened organically. I've been on it for since the start, too much, yeah, all day, every day. Like I suppose a lot of us, but yeah, I would use Twitter a lot, and I suppose a little bit of Instagram as well. I'm not a huge fan of Instagram, but it's kind of a necessary evil, I think. But I suppose I kind of followed, and then through my masters, my coaching science masters, I suppose I started doing a little bit more of my own kind of deep dives through the journals and the articles on this sort of stuff. And when you see the authors that pop up regularly, or you see the guys like JB and the guys that he's sharing and that he trusts and works in, I kind of follow a lot of his philosophies, or our philosophies align a lot. I think myself and JB more in terms of acceleration and resisted work and things like that. So you kind of look to who these guys look to, and you branch off that kind of way.
What about some highlights, mate, that you've sort of spring front of mind? You've mentioned a couple already. Yeah, moments that you've
Mm,
sort of been proud of over your career.
yeah, yeah. On the track, I suppose. Yeah, I was actually lucky enough to get to Tokyo as well for the Olympics. I was working with the Irish Federation as their media liaison for track and field. So I actually got to go there. Was one of the lucky few. So then when I had two athletes in the mixed 4x4 relay, they qualified for the final. So kind of walk into the stadium to see a couple of your athletes in an Olympic final was a pretty special
Wow,
occasion. And I think like if it was the year before when it was supposed to happen, there was likelihood that one of them wouldn't have qualified for sure, and the other one maybe not. So, the postponement due to COVID, while it was obviously not good for any of us, just happened to be lucky for those guys. So that was definitely a highlight for me. Yeah, there's been a few. I suppose on the field sports side of things, then I worked with Leinster Rugby here for the under 20 sub academy here for a stint during kind of that 2021 season as well. And a lot of those guys went on to be part of the Irish under 20 team that won the Grand Slam in the Six Nations over here. And just they were just really good guys to work with as well, and it was nice to see success for those guys. Obviously on a completely different field of sport.
absolutely. And on the flip side, mate, some moments where you've had great growth periods and perhaps challenging times over your career. Obviously, working in high performance sport comes pressure. There would have been some
Mm.
sort of situations that you've sort of learned a lot.
Yeah, I suppose a lot of them are kind of around different injury scenarios, and then maybe around selection decisions for relays with some of our guys, because when for athletes that are kind of right at the top but not quite there, sometimes the relay is the option to get to the major championships when they haven't hit the individual time themselves, and then you've got to rely on the selector to actually pick you in the first place. So overcoming some of the relationship issues that are not issues, but um, helping those athletes deal with those selections and get over it and strive to be their best. Can be challenging because you can only do your best, and then somebody else has the decision to pick some other guy who's faster than you at the end of the day. And then I suppose on the injury side of things, yeah, it's a constant battle in track and field, especially because you're trying to get, especially this time of year, it's our summer season, trying to get as close to that red line as possible to get the performance out. But with that comes the risk, and I suppose myself with the background in soft tissue therapy and a bit of S&C, I'm kind of trying to push all those things that little bit more, and see if you can get people back quicker when those things do pop up as well. But ideally, go by the do no harm mantra, so it never occurs in the first place.
For sure, for sure. Moving into the key topic, mate, what are some key components for acceleration in team sport athletes? Because I know a lot of the people tuning in will be coming from that background. So, yeah, how does
Hmm.
this what are sort of the key areas of focus when you're working with a team based athlete from an acceleration point of view?
Yeah, I think when I come in for a team in the first place, I always try to get across the point that what I'm there to do is teach a skill. So acceleration is a skill. It's not there. I'm not there to leave them out of breath or leave them puking on the side of the pitch at the end of the session. Trying to get field sports players to not jog back between exercises or between drills is the hardest part of the time. Like, I just walk back. Do this 10-meter exercise, walk back, chill out, relax. We've got an hour here. Let's not overdo it. So I suppose a lot of the time I do kind of in general put a constraint on my time with those teams and say, look, I'd like an hour of specific acceleration speed work here with these guys, so we don't have to rush anything and put them out of breath. But in terms of like acceleration being a skill, in Australian football, I've just had a quick look yesterday at a couple of papers, GPS data. Like you're talking 200 to 300 accelerations in a game, where you're getting above 4 kilometers an hour within a second or whatever it might be. Like you're doing something 200 times in a game. If you can do that a little tiny bit better, you're doing something better
Mm.
200 times. I'm kind of saying, I always say to the
Mm.
Gaelic football guys here, the rugby guys, like it's a little bit less in rugby, but obviously those accelerations are a little bit more aggressive or more impactful maybe. But in Gaelic football, it's up around 200 as well. And I'm saying, how often would you work on your hand passing in a week, or how many shooting drills would you do? How many, in rugby, if it's passing, how often do you work on that? And then they're saying maybe twice, 3 times we do some drills here and there every session. I'm like, and how often do you work on your acceleration? And it's kind of like head scratches. I'm kind of going, guys, you're going to do something 200 times, 2 or 3 of these things every minute, and you could be better at it. Let's be better at it. The
Yeah.
the output from that for me is a no brainer. Maybe they're thinking
Mm.
something different, but I just think that's a complete. It's a there's just little wins there to be had all the way through the game. Um, and I suppose I always try and get across the point of, or I don't know if I made this up myself. I heard Stu McMillan, who's over now, he's a sprint coach, had mentioned, or was on a different podcast, and he was talking about effectiveness versus efficiency. And when I listened to it, I was like, oh, he's come to the same conclusion as myself, but he had gone a completely different direction with it. So anyway, I go with effectiveness and efficiency for these guys. Let's be efficient in our acceleration, use as little energy as we can, and let's be as effective in each acceleration as we can. And if we kind of tick those two boxes, or at least one of them at a time, then we're getting better as players.
And I guess from the efficiency point of view, are there your
Mm.
favorite drills, if you like, that you like to do to work on acceleration and specifically, I guess, your first three steps for a footballer?
I kind of look at posture a lot and this sort of thing. So I'm trying to hit nice shapes. I'm trying to get that nice straight line from the ankle right through the shoulder. Ankle, hip, shoulder, being in that straight line. Get the players comfortable with feeling those positions, and a lot of the time it takes them a long time to really trust that their body is in the right position. If I was showing them a video back, I'd say, do you feel like you're hitting that straight line there? They'd be like, yeah, yeah, and show them the video, and they're completely folded at the hip. So getting them used to that bit of proprioception, how they're interacting with the ground. I want them to really feel their foot on the ground and where their hip is, especially when that foot hits the ground. So I do a lot of hip focus work, um, even in the warm up. So like the sessions that I'll do in general, the first couple of weeks will be very, very acceleration heavy, but it'll literally be the last 10 minutes where they'll actually be moving anyway fast. I bring everything right back down, slow drills, walking drills, heavy resisted walks, everything right down so that they can get used to how their body moves, and feel those positions without having to force them um, through the through the air and through speed and lose all that coordination again.
One of the YouTube listeners has just sent in Oliver Williams. How many speed focus sessions a week is recommended? How much of an impact does it work in the gym affect sprint speed and acceleration? It's a good question.
So I suppose how much do you have time for?
Yeah.
Twice a week, ideally, if you can. What I would always say with team sports is try and sprinkle a little bit in fairly often. Obviously, you want, like any other kind of high intensity work that's going to maybe cause a bit of tissue damage, or that needs time to recover and repair. Not in terms of injuries, obviously, just in terms of work. You want that kind of 72-hour window, or 48 hours at worst. We'd kind of go off the same ethos on the track. We'd rarely do 2 track sessions back to back. It'd be 48 hours before any intense stuff, and the same after big gym days, try and leave that 48 hours before we hit the track again. So like if it was twice a week with a certain number of reps, that it depends. You just need to really hit that high speed if you are working on max velocity, and if it is acceleration, I'd probably err on the side of caution and do less, but I'd really, really like to be done well. There's literally no point in doing it at all if it's not been done well. You see teams and guys going out there and doing 20, 30 reps of accelerations, but it's like the gym. You just don't add load onto poor technique. So it's the same in acceleration. You don't add volume onto inefficiency. Let's just be really efficient and effective first, and then we can add on the volume and really reinforce those good movement patterns. And then
And you
the second
touched
part,
on,
the gym. Sorry, the gym
yeah.
part. Then, like when I go into these teams where like these guys are animals. Like even the kids, like some of the like I mentioned Dan Moore. He's a S&C coach for a really high level rugby school here. I call it rugby school. It's a private school, but rugby is what it's for. They're a pathway into Leinster, into Ireland. Like he's at any one time in the Irish senior team. There's guys that he 3 or 4 guys that he has coached as kids. So these guys are strong, powerful. Like I don't need to do anything really in that sense, except for try and harness that strength and power that they already have. Open up the hips, let them use their hips a little bit more. The posterior chain, get those glutes actually working. Open up the hip flexors a little bit for range of motion wise, and I'll be able to spot that. Like my warm up is, I'll do a very general warm up, which takes 10-15 minutes, and I'll be able to spot straight away where they're tight and stiff, through the way they're moving.
And in terms of mobility, like you mentioned,
Mm.
sort of 10, 15 minutes where you're doing mobility drills. What about outside of training from a recovery point of view or flexibility point of view? Do you like athletes doing static stretching to improve their, I guess, passive length of the muscle tissues of hamstrings and hip flexors? Or is it more using the range and doing it in the gym with load and then also doing it in drilling and doing a
Mm.
more dynamic mobility, I guess?
Yeah, I've probably experimented on myself a lot over the years with this kind of stuff. As a high hurdler, the hurdles are 3'6", a meter and 6 centimeters. So, looking for flexibility was always something I was about, and I used to do a lot of kind of static stretching, say post sessions before, or a couple of days out from big sessions. So I wasn't having too much of an effect, or doing some kind of distraction work at the hip. Put a heavy green band, pulling the leg down, so it's distracting from the hip socket to try and get that, but at the end of the day, I still picked up the same hamstring niggles that I was getting. So I was kind of like, maybe this wasn't as effective as I thought. And I do think kind of like the bit of eccentric loading with heavy loads in the gym for kind of hamstring kind of area or low back, just those kind of things are really, really effective. I do like to get that bit of mobility through gym work, or else just through a little bit of kind of passive or low level mobility work at home, not necessarily lying down and holding for 60-90 seconds. A little bit of that as well for certain areas around the hips, um, saying like your pigeon pose stretches, things like that, where you can just plonk down in front of the TV and just get a nice like low level 4 out of 10, sit for 90 seconds, take a break, switch over. I do like that kind of stuff, but sometimes I know when I recommend a little bit of that stuff to athletes or players, they tend to stay in athlete and player mode and try and be the best at stretching and try and
Mm.
get to that, 11 out of 10. And let's see if I can hold this and I'll grip my teeth and sweat. Well, that's not the goal of the exercise.
Yeah, yeah, well said. And actually, probably a good segue for the next one. What are there common misconceptions when it comes to developing acceleration and top speed in football that you'd like to debunk?
Yeah, I think I've probably touched on it a little bit already. Like, you don't need the huge volume, I think. We don't need the 20, 30, 40 reps of this stuff. Definitely not like at full acceleration. Like, it's like anything. You don't just go and run 100 meters to get better at the 100 meters. You have to break it down into its parts. So you need to identify what you're looking for first. Like for me, it's that posture side of things and that effective and efficiency. Um, and then it's about just layering on top of that the volume. So it might be by doing slower stuff, doing resisted work, and then eventually like dropping that resistance down to the point where we're moving from a standing start, from a 3 point start. We're trying to get them to be more aggressive and explosive. And then it's like it's slowing all that right down in the drills as well, so that the players are comfortable with their structural tissue taking a bit of the load. So say like doing a sprint walk or an A walk, the listeners might be familiar with. So might be familiar with A skips, especially. I think there's 70 different types of A skip. I couldn't tell you which one anybody uses at any one time, but it's getting to that A position, so knee up in front, kind of ankle dangling below the knee, and foot dorsiflexed. But doing that in a walking pattern and slowing it right down. So it's so funny to see the challenges that people have just standing on one leg. Um,
Mm.
Especially maybe players who are on soft pitches or hard pitches all the time in boots. I like to get them out of the comfort zone, and if I can, and if the teams and the coaches are kind enough or buy in enough, we get them down to the track, and it gets into a completely different surface, completely different environment. Get them into runners rather than boots. A decent pair of trainers. Sometimes some of the guys have actually got spikes for the athletes, so you get a chance to get them moving a little bit faster than they will be on the pitch. But again, we're getting them onto a track and we're telling them to walk and walk really slow in a drill. And they're like, "What's the point in being here? We're doing this." I was like, "Yeah, but it's really gonna help." And I can see them, the instability at the ankle straight away pops up. So I don't know if that answered that question, but I do think that in the misconceptions, it's probably like anything. Let's do loads of this and we'll get better at it. Let's do let's do very few and let's do them really, really well.
Yeah, and even learn how to walk, I guess, before you
Mm,
run.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. To
yeah.
put the cliche out.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I love that. That's great. And from um, I guess for those that are trying to improve their top speed, we've talked about
Mm,
acceleration and the importance of that a fair bit now. But for those that want to improve their top speed, what would a typical sort of session look like? You mentioned acceleration sessions when you try and let the football club give you an hour so you can properly do the warm up,
mm.
properly break down the drilling, and then work on those postures and have adequate rest periods. Is top speed similar? An hour long duration? Is it less? Is it more microdosing across the week? Yeah, talk us about your philosophy of top speed for
Mm.
footballers.
So when I'm working with a team, I like to get that acceleration kind of nailed down for a couple of weeks, so I'm comfortable with that they're moving better at least. It's not necessary. I don't have speed gates out to check that they're moving any faster. I'm happy with the shapes they're hitting are improved, and then I'll start to sprinkle a little bit of that max V and top end speed stuff in at the end of that session, because I'll have a little bit less or more time. I'll have less coaching to do in terms of interrupting the session to give pointers and feedback. So I'll start to sprinkle it in then because we won't have done a huge amount of actual high intensity work. We will have done a good bit of loading around the hip, but they'll also be very, very switched on and aware of how they're interacting with the ground from that acceleration or the resisted work that it kind of feeds nicely in. And then in terms of if it's just kind of max V focused, it can be a little bit shorter. So like if I'm popping in with a team on the pitch and I have a little bit less time, I'll say, look, you can get them generally warmed up there, whatever sort of warm up you take for footy or for rugby or whatever it is. A warm up's a warm up in general. Like we're going to be switching on the right muscles anyway, preparing for a bit of intensity. I probably will still come in and do a little bit of my own kind of drills and stuff, or maybe a little bit of specific kind of hip mobility stuff before we start. But then I love to use the wickets or the mini hurdles, the small little kind of banana hurdles. There's many different names for them, but I use them a lot with guys on the pitch for hitting those top speed or max speed positions. And as a team sports coach, they're magic because once you kind of figure out what you're looking for and you know your spacings and you know how to cue them, then their hurdles do all the work for you. Like the guys have to run through the hurdle and that's it. If you can give them a tiny bit of feedback on it, they'll do it so much better. And you try and get them to hold the shapes that you're seeing on the hurdle for a little bit of time off the hurdle as well. And all of a sudden, they're in really nice positions. So it's kind of if you set up a fly 20 or a fly 30 or a fly 10, and just ask them to run through all the time, and you're trying to change or fix or improve 10 different things at once. There's an awful lot of feedback you have to give every athlete or every player. If you've got 30, 40 guys out on the pitch and you put out 2, 3 lines of wickets, let them run through, they'll figure it out very, very quickly. First rep they do, you go back here, how'd that feel? And they kind of a bit of quiet. And I was like, did you feel like an idiot? And they're like, yes. And I was like, yeah, because you're doing something completely different to your run. Yes, you ran really well there. The thing you'll spot straight away is guys leaning back to lift their knees because they're not used to it. They're used to kicking out the backside, swinging the foot through. Can't do that when the hurdle is in the way because you'll kick it up into the air. So they do have to get that foot out in front, high foot in front. Good front side mechanics gives them that space to attack down into the pitch. Um, and again, like I said, the posture is just about maintaining that hip height all the way through. If you can keep your hip height, you're 6 foot tall. All of a sudden, you're still 6 foot, or you're 6'1" in the air. You can get that foot down fully underneath your hip with a straight leg rather than having to land it out in front of you and put the brakes on.
Very good. Yeah, and you mentioned doing that with a large group.
Mm,
So 2 to 3 lines. Obviously, you're getting good amount of rest periods with those ratios. How
mm,
do you sort of do you have them in height or leg? Like, how do you sort of break up the groups to know? So you have to keep changing the wickets around from a practical point of view
mm.
in session flow.
Yeah, even with the guys we have on the tracks, we kind of figured out a little bit. One of the guys that we coach, Killian Green, he ran the first leg in that mixed 4x4 relay, and he was actually the fastest first leg runner across the whole competition that day. So he kind of pulled it out of the bag, but he had a lot of kind of not even injuries, but he had a bit of a hamstring tightness and issue that when we would try and really nail his speed, like he's a very, very fast guy. Like he ran 45-1 split for the relay that day. For people that know track and field, it's pretty good. He's a speed based guy, so he would probably run sub 21 seconds for the 200 meters and things like that. So he's got wheels, but when he went to open them up, he would just get a little bit caught through that hamstring. So we just got him on the wickets on the mini hurdles to do like, he'd be running over 20 of them. He'd be doing 90 meters with a 20-30 meter roll in and a 20-30 meter roll out, but keeping them tight and restricted. And it just really forces that tight turnover and those good postures. And it's a really, really safe way to hit. Like he'd be hitting well over 10 meters per second there on those wickets. And so he's getting that stimulus without the real risk of casting or reaching out in front and maybe putting too much pressure on the eccentric swing phase of that hamstring. Same with the guys on the pitch. In general, I would tend to err on the side of being the space be too small rather than too long. You don't want to see them bounding or jumping through. So I'd set up a couple of lines. I definitely have one difference, one line that's a little bit shorter than the others, and that might be if anybody wants to jump into it this evening or today out there. I'd kind of start at like 5.5 pigeon steps on my feet, like toe to heel, 5.5. Put 2 or 3 of them at that, 2 or 3 of them at 6, maybe 2 or 3 of them at 6.5, or even smaller, like 6.25, and then go out to 6.5. But you're talking running over like maybe between 8 and 12 of the hurdles, increasing the distance, give them 15, 20 meter run into it so they can kind of sight that first hurdle. And the most important part for me then is that section after the last hurdle, that they're not just stopping and collapsing, that we do have a set marker down at the end, maybe 20 meters past, that when they come off that hurdle in a nice tall hip high position, that they can repeat that stride pattern all the way to the end, and then they can sink and relax, whatever. But it just kind of reinforces that, well, the hurdles aren't in there.
Yeah, and for those that try and make technical change, it makes sense to have that 20-30 meters without the hurdle, so they continue that on, and then do you sort of eventually just finish the session where they're just running straight 90s without the hurdles to be able to transfer into straight line
Yeah,
running?
yeah, pretty much. So I wouldn't give them that sort of distance at all, and I learned that pretty quickly from the rugby guys who were like, they were borderline professional athletes at that stage, and some of them were very fast. And they're obviously very strong. But like I kind of just rocked down. I was like, yeah, we'll do some fly 20s at the end of the session here today. Put out a 20 meter segment, give them 20 in, 20 fast, 20 out, kind of, and none of them can hold 20 meters. So probably getting to about 12 meters. So I brought it into 15. I think the first day, and I was kind of like, right, this is a bit of an eye opener, because on the track we'd go a general fly session will be 30 30 30. So you have that 30 meter acceleration, you have 30 meters of max V, and then you have 30 where you're not decelerating, but you're cruising.
Mm.
And all of a sudden I was like, all right, 20 is not enough here. We need to go back to probably 10, 12, 15 is all they can manage here. They're hitting shapes that I like, but only for 3-4 steps. And then it's a case of that not being used to the posture, holding that hip in that position, lets them down. But as we went on then through the weeks, we could push that out to 20. So definitely start short. Start with 10s, 20 roll in, a 10 fly, and a 10 or 15 or 20 roll out as well. But I always try and, when I do bleed that into the end of those acceleration sessions, like, right, look, we're tired, end of the session. No, we're not that tired, but end of the session, we've been in neural fatigue, definitely.
Mm.
Brains have been working. Let's just be really relaxed here. Let's just, nice tall, let's run the positions we were running in across the wickets. Nice tall, smooth and relaxed through these. We're not 90%. I was like, don't have the speed gates out here, guys. Nobody's watching. We're just going to be really smooth and tall through this. And that's when they run fast. They switch off, they relax themselves. They're a bit more fluid. Or I say, if there's a stand or whatever nearby, I'm like, look, over that stand there is full of 20,000 people. All I want you to think is that they're looking at you going, geez, he runs really well. That's it. Not saying that he's stressed or he's got tension through his neck or he's flying it. That guy runs really well. I really like how he's running.
Yeah, I love it. It's a good visual.
Mm.
And when you said the athletes were breaking down, the rugby athletes around that 15-20 meters, is that
Mm.
through coaching eye? You could sort of just see straight away. Was that video analysis that you like to use? Like, talk us through how you pick that up when they're moving at that
Yeah,
speed.
I would pick it up through with the eye. I'd be there'd be certain things I'd be looking for. It'd be that kind of the front side mechanics, I suppose, mainly. Looking for that foot height in front. See that, do they have space for that foot to get back down underneath themselves rather than clawing back. or swinging through really low and having to claw back into the ground? Are they punching that knee through nice and high and giving them the space to operate underneath their hip? I would take a lot of video stuff as well. It's nice for seeing some things you missed, and especially when you're working through a lot of athletes, to be able to give them feedback. All of a sudden 10 players have gone through, and you saw a lot with every one of them, and you're like, okay, which one did I see which one now? Kind of they're all wearing the same kit and the same shorts and the same boots, and you're gonna. I know with some of the guys, with the Leinster guys, I was literally their boots was the only thing I could recognize them. Who were training at 8 a.m. in the winter. They were wearing woolly hats, jackets, scarves, nearly. So there was very little identifiable features, and you're going, the pink boots, right? Let me look at the other video of the pink boots. Okay, yeah, that's the same guy and from previous weeks. But yeah, I would tend to trust my own eye for a lot of the Max V stuff, especially. I can see it pretty easily. Some of the acceleration stuff can be a little bit more tricky when you're trying to see kind of step length, or it's kind of contact times. Not that we're measuring that, but you can see it a lot easier by getting a bit of footage and breaking it down.
Hmm. A couple questions have come through. Hazard Mills on YouTube. How can I enhance my athletic on-field performance for AFL? Quite broad for you, Joe, but
Mm.
I guess from an athletic point of view, my next question to sort of tie into that, like, what are your favourite for those that are lacking the stiffness and the power aspect? They're technically
Mm.
very proficient, but they need that athleticism. What are your favourite sort of exercises, if you like, in the gym to improve power and for acceleration and sprinting?
Mm. Yeah, so I suppose like the general strength and power work is obviously going to help, like getting strong through the hip, doing some heavy max lifts, improving that general strength is obviously going to help get guys strong within reason. There's a certain level of strength you need, just to be able to perform, for the body to be robust enough to hold those shapes and positions. And then general power stuff too, like whether it be, if they're an experienced athlete and they're doing, power cleans or Olympic lifts, or whether it's some just resisted jumps, weighted jumps, things like that. Your standard plyometrics. And I think something that I'm not sure is utilized enough, that I use an awful lot, is the medicine ball. I generally bring a boot full of medicine balls to all of those sessions that I do in terms of acceleration. It's part of my warm up. Like, if I showed you the session, I kind of throw it up when I'm doing some presentations. It's just a very crude Excel file, but if it's 30 cells, probably 25 of them are what I would deem the warm up, and then the last five are literally a couple of accelerations. But there's medicine ball and plyo work in there as a huge component of that, and I do think the medicine ball can be used, rather than maybe it was seen as kind of an archaic tool for conditioning. Still, it's a very useful power tool, like that you can be really, really precise on what you're trying to do with it. You can get into very exacting positions, and for the guys, say on the pitch, put them into an acceleration position, a staggered stance, getting that. What I try to always tell the guys is to get them comfortable in that staggered position is, toe to the line, split the feet slightly, get that knee or the front leg over the toe, get the chest over the knee. So we've got chest, then knee, then toe, that's our alignment. Get them into that position. It's really uncomfortable for them in the first place, and then put a 5 kilo mid ball in their hands, and we do an acceleration in that position. It's just a nice way of overloading that position, and also gets them really uncomfortable in that shape. And for guys on the field, they're going to be trying to accelerate from all kinds of positions. Like, it's not a straight line, simple get into the blocks like what I do on the track. I know what I'm doing every time. They're going to be trying to accelerate from all sorts of strange and weird scenarios. So let's get them really good at being uncomfortable first of all, and then getting out of those uncomfortable positions with a really nice acceleration. So, for the power side of things, I would do plyos, mid ball stuff on the pitch. Get them done prior to those acceleration sessions, those max V sessions. For acceleration, we're looking for kind of horizontal stuff in terms of our plyos. For our max V, a little bit more vertical. So whether that be, say like a drop off a box with the med ball into a vertical throw, getting nice extension through the joints and limbs, or that loaded acceleration position, or maybe some bounding or some skipping for speed or distance, different things like that, where we're interacting with the pitch or with the ground a little bit differently.
Good. Hopefully that helps answer your query about improving on-field performance, Hazza. And Oliver's written in, where can we find some examples of great sprint posture and examples of poor form from, that goes from, I guess, that 5 to 10 meter fly that you were talking about?
Mm. There's a really nice video. I'm not sure where it originated. Maybe it was Ken Clark. There's a guy you can Google, or there's a video of two guys on a treadmill. One of them is the team sport athlete, and one of them is the high level sprinter. It's kind of shot in a real hyper slow mo, maybe black and white. But you've probably seen it yourself and didn't realize what it was, maybe, or you might be familiar with it. But it just shows the mechanics and the difference mechanics of a really high level sprinter versus a high level, I think it was a soccer player in the States, maybe. You can just see that the backside mechanics are so dominant on the soccer player, and they're kicking their backside with their toe pointing up in the air, and it's swinging through really low. Whereas the sprinter has that more upright posture. The knee comes up much further in front. Everything is kind of kept to the front side. Once the thigh reaches the vertical position at the under the hip, it punches right through again. So I'm not sure what you'd Google for that. Maybe if you just pop in team sport versus sprint video or something like that on Google, you might get it. But it's fairly out there, and it's a really nice one just to show the difference in those. And then also in terms of, like, if you want to see good sprint postures, if you Altis in the States, ALTIS, they're kind of a high level sprints group, but also an education platform now. You pop onto their Twitter, their Instagram, you'll see some really nice examples of kilograms. So kilograms are just screenshots basically of different sprint positions, frame by frame and broken down, and they show that the really nice postures there for you as well.
Very good. Yeah, well, I'll do some digging around and try and find that video. That sounds like a
Mm,
great comparison. So I'll find it
yeah.
and add it to the show notes for those listening in. Final question before we sort of start to wrap it up, Jared, and then feel free to anything we haven't discussed on this topic to
Mm,
bring in. But I guess for the high performance staff and strength and conditioning coaches, I know you've helped consult some in that are working with rugby or soccer or AFL. What are some sort of common tips that you sort of provide when preparing to run a main warm up with a acceleration focus or a top speed element that you've felt from a coach's perspective?
I suppose I mentioned a lot of it already. Is that mobility part at the start? I like to see, how these guys move. So we'll do things like say like a lunge crawl. So we're in that lunge position. We've got both arms on the side, and we'll do a little bit of T-sign work through that. So we'll drop the elbow down to the floor, or try to, and rotate away, and you'll just see, like, I know when I start the season with the track and field guys, they'll be kind of similar position. That elbow won't get anywhere near, won't get down towards the ankle. But by the time we get 3 or 4 weeks in, we're elbows touching the ground, and we've got that movement through the spine. But it's real kind of adductor stiffness and tightness that is highlighting. So you'll have guys who are literally, their back is, they're in that neutral lunge position. And I tell them to rotate their left shoulder down towards the floor, and they literally can't get past their neutral. So a couple of weeks time, we might see just that little bit of movement there that they have opened up that little bit through the hips. And I think it's probably something that's not really focused on very much as well, is the role of adductors in acceleration. So if you are kind of a backroom staff or a sports science guy or the S&C or the physio, adductors play a huge role. So I do like even just to throw in some sort of side lunge or some sort of activation around those adductors in that warm up, because very, very often you'll see guys who start back into, even in the track side of things, they'll start back into some acceleration work, and they'll be thinking, "Oh, better get my hammies ready here because we're going to move pretty quickly." And all of a sudden, it's the next day. Yeah, my groins are really tight today. It's like, yeah, you didn't do any work on your adductors in that warm up at all. I could see, I was watching you. So I think it is something that's kind of underrated. And then that med ball work really feeds into that, because we get those muscles switched on really well by overloading without even have to think about it. So I suppose in terms of, like, I don't know if we will get a chance to talk about this, but what I really focus on a lot is, slowing that thing down, using heavy bands for the resisted work. So if you're a practitioner and you're looking for, the quick fix, you don't need to get the heavy sled out and try and rotate 30 guys through 3 sleds or whatever you might be. You get
Mm.
you get 15 heavy green bands. I don't know if you use those. You probably use those in the gym all the time over there as well. The thick
Yeah.
green bands. I think they're like 35 to 55 kilos or whatever they're sold as. But they cost €15, maybe €20. You get 15 of them, and then you've got 30 guys in pairs happy days. You're way to go. You've got a heavy sled there straight away. So
Mm.
I start them off with full resistance. Say the guy at the back, your job is to give pretty much full resistance. Let them move, obviously, but the guy in front can get into his Titanic pose and lean forward without worrying about falling over. He can get into really nice acceleration positions, and he can trust that he's going over. All he can focus on. I always say it as well. It's the one time during a session where you can literally focus on one step at a time. You can do one step, do it really well, pause, do the next step, and the guy at the back is your mate. He's you're trusting he's gonna not let your nose hit the deck. So you do a rep, you swap over, you do a rep, swap over, you do 3 or 4 of them, and it only takes 8 minutes, 5 minutes, you're done. You've got four heavy sled walks done there straight away. So I think not to be too caught up in equipment or spending money on this sort of thing, come up with solutions like that, which are super effective. I don't even with the guys in the track now, we haven't taken out the sleds for that kind of stuff in a long time because it's just so much quicker and so much more effective to
Sure.
just get the bands
Yeah.
out and let's go. Yeah.
And in what situations would you sort of attach the power band around the neck in a harness position, like you get in that sled position? And what situations would you have it in the typical position? Well, I've been most exposed to, and I've seen the
Mm.
most of, which is around the hips with the partner, and you're doing your A skips, and I guess your posture's much more upright.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
which one do you
It's a funny
prefer?
one.
And
I tend to go with the hip all the time. Yeah, I tend to use the hip. But then, like, if we do get the sled out, there generally can be chest harnesses for those. So
mm,
it depends on it. It really does depend on the player or the athlete as well. Some people are very much kind of hip focused. So the back will arch and the shoulders will pop back. So you may need to resist them from the chest or from the shoulders just to
right,
force them into that position. And then as well as that, some of those guys might just need to go on a prowler instead. They need to push rather than pull. Because the torso is just wanting to do too much or get into ineffective positions. So it is a bit of trial and error. But with the green bands, I'll just lash them around the hips. And the main thing that you'll see straight away is guys put them on their up around their belly buttons. And I'm like, what muscles are working opposite your belly button? It's like your spinal erectors, which we don't want to be working at all here. In terms of this, we want to get that band right down the hip flexors. Opposite our hip flexors are our glutes. Our glutes need to be working. So generally, I'll be like, get it down below your waistband, below your waistband, below your waistband, and it might take 5 or 6 times. I'll be like, lower, 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 lower. Okay, there, that's where it is. And they're kind of like, ooh, this is kind of down on the area I'm not supposed to be talking about. But it's like,
yeah,
yeah, that's where it needs to be. Get it across your hip flexors there, lads, and let's get our glutes working.
yeah, right. I haven't heard that one before. That's a great power tip.
Mm,
There you go. I'll
yeah, yeah,
definitely
big
be
time.
using that.
Yeah,
Thank
same with
you.
like any like say I would do some banded jumps and things as well. Like just same again, get the green band or purple band, attach them to the fence at the side of the pitch, put it down around the waist. You just jump as high as you can, but you're being pulled back by the band. So you really have to force those hips forward. You have to drive them against the band. But again, if I have the band up along my belly button, then I'm overloading my spinal erectors and nothing else. Get it right down my hip flexors. My glutes have to do all the work.
Love that. Love that. In moving into sort of, I guess, more final questions, mate. In your work life, do you have any pet peeves when it comes to accelerations and sprint training, or just in the industry overall? Anything that makes you angry?
Um, Not particularly. I don't think. I suppose there's a lot of kind of general themes that run through it anyway. For me in my work life, pet peeves is just trying to find weekends and free time to get this stuff done. But and then in Ireland, I suppose the weather is the issue. But no, I suppose it's the only thing is trying to find the most effective solutions for this sort of stuff when you're working with bigger groups is probably the hardest part, especially on the track when you've got guys who are super athletes and it's really really minutiae you're looking for. Trying to find that time to work with every athlete and give them their best it can be tricky. And I suppose it's not necessarily a pet peeve, but it's just something that I'd like to probably get better at myself and get more effective at is providing that really key feedback, or it might even be not giving them no feedback at all and letting them figure it out for themselves. But it's just figuring out those ways to serve the athletes best is always the challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. And what about favorite way to spend a day off? Like you mentioned, time is limited. When you do get one, what do you
Mm.
like to do?
Oh, I like to do very little. I like to sit on my backside a lot of the time and just chill out. But I suppose I live a couple of hours from my family as well, so I like to get down and see my family and see my nieces and nephews. My sister lives near the beach as well. It's nearly 4 hours from where I am here, but it's paradise up there when the weather is good, which isn't that often, but when it is good, it's like being in a different world. So yeah, I like hopping in the car and spinning up to them, and chilling out for a while. But generally, I like to just unwind and switch off and try not to
Yeah.
think about track and field or performance for a day if I get the chance.
Recharge the batteries. Yeah. And
Mm.
we're recording this on the 1st of June, so sort of middle part of 2023. What's on the horizon for you, Joe, that you're most excited about for the rest of the
Mm.
year?
Yeah, so the track season's just kicking off here for the summer, track and field. So our training group, as I said, are starting to line out the last couple of weeks, and it's going to be a big summer. We'll have guys and girls in the European under 20s and under 23s who'll be kind of pushing towards medals, and then the World Athletics Championships are in Budapest in August, and we should hopefully have 2 or 3 guys and girls going to that as well. Um, like I said, the two in Tokyo at the Olympics, and then the girl who went on that relay went to the Worlds last year with another one of our guys, slotted in on the relay when the other guy was injured. So we were lucky enough to have a ready-made replacement there for them. So hopefully those 3 guys will be going to the World Championships especially. And we'll be looking towards some big performances and PBs on the track all around, yeah.
Absolutely. Well, all the best with the rest of the season. Thank you so much for jumping on and sharing with us your experiences, some stories, but of course some practical tips, both for athletes and high performance coaches. I really appreciate your time. For those that have any follow-up questions for you, Jared, where's the best place to get in contact?
Yeah, probably Twitter or Instagram are probably the easiest. I deleted my Instagram during our first lockdown here. I was just fed up with it, and then I set up a new one kind of because I had to have one basically as a coach. So I have one there, and I don't really use it too extensively in terms of posting and stuff, but I do put up a lot of stories from training and stuff here and there. So it's just my name, Gerard underscore OD,
Yep.
or yeah, Gerard underscore OD underscore, I think, on both Instagram and Twitter. And even if I'm not posting too regularly, I'll be there to reply to you if you have any questions or want to give me a shout on anything.
For sure. Yeah, well, we'll add the links, both Instagram and Twitter, in the show notes. And for those that have tuned in halfway through, make sure to listen to the very start. We dive straight into the practical tips from the first minute. So this will live on our YouTube channel until we release it in 3 weeks' time. And our next live chat will be next Thursday, the 8th of June, with John Kiley. That'll be at 4 p.m. Australian Standard Time. So I'll see you guys then. Thanks again, Jared.
Thanks, Jack.